Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 7:08 a.m. East Coast time, Thursday, August 15th. We have a 5-game NFL Week 2 preseason slate. Week 2 starting off tonight. We got 5 games. I've broken it down pretty in-depth, spending, I don't even know, over 20 to 30 hours this week looking into preseason DFS, updating notes every single day on Patreon. I'm excited to finally give you some early interest, and then later on today I'll have a podcast / and or article up on Patreon where I'll have my final thoughts, final types of plays that I'm going to be getting to from this game tonight and why. But welcome if you're new here. My name is Sal Vetri. I do cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL streets right here, the MLB. There's a video up today, WNBA and NBA. A little bit of golf, but not so much with all these other sports going on. So you're probably new here, or there's a decent shot, and this stuff always be popping up on me. There's a decent shot you might be new here because it's the NFL and it's going to attract a lot more viewership. So if you do get any value from this video, if it does help you in any way, please hit that subscribe button. We just plowed through 6,000 subscribers, and I'm excited to keep going, keep growing. I do want to let you know that if you are new or you are debating on it, I do have an NFL daily fantasy course out. It's linked down below. You can click the link. It's the first thing that'll pop up down below. See if that's something for you. I spent hours and hours and really months on it, so I'm excited about that. And also linked down below, I kind of hinted at it. There's a Patreon where I have exclusive content. Later today, there will be a podcast and or article. I haven't decided which format yet. People like both, so it'll be based on what I'm kind of preferencing, but I'll talk about kind of my final plays. This is my plays or my interest right now. And then before the games lock in 12 or 13 hours, we'll get down into sort of my final plays. That's on Patreon. Free guides down below as well. Check that all out. Check out the course. Hit the subscribe button if you get any sort of value from this. Comment down below anything you want. I might talk fast if you're new here. There's a button down in the bottom right corner of the screen to slow down the pace of my voice. I'm sorry, I'm an Italian New Yorker. That's just the way that I am. So thinking about talking slower messes me up. So now let's get into it. We'll talk about each position. I'll go breakdown by breakdown. These are going to be the stat sheets that I use for the regular season YouTube videos. You can see right here, I'm trying to compile the key stats that I like to use little by little from last year. But for right now, we're just going to deal with notes because there's not really any data on week 1 of the preseason when majority of these guys we're talking about, or a good amount of them, are going to get cut. So in terms of quarterbacks, there's 6 that I'm looking at right now early on. No real ranking. I'll give you the ones that I like the most, but Cody Kessler is going to be interesting. I do have interest in him. I have this filtered by my interest. You can see in column E, it says yes is green, means I have interest. Some players I don't have interest in. I'll talk about them. Let's get this out in the open. It's week 2. A lot of starters are going to play one drive. Or one quarter. Don't go overreacting that Aaron Rodgers is playing a quarter today and put him in all your lineups. Can Aaron Rodgers throw 2 touchdowns on 2 drives? Yeah, he definitely can. Can other quarterbacks who will have 6 to 7 drives today score 2 touchdowns? Yeah, they can. They'll be playing worse defenses and might have a more likely chance to do that and just have more opportunity. So similar to everybody losing their heads about Patrick Mahomes playing one drive or one quarter and really only getting 1 drive and had an upside of 2 drives in that last game, got you your big 3 fantasy points. It's too much. You need players that are going to go up against worse defenses who actually have to prove themselves and who are going to be guaranteed to play like 4 drives in the game with the upside of playing 5, 6, or 7 into the 4th quarter, which a couple of these quarterbacks do. So I don't really care that Aaron Rodgers, I don't really care that even Kyler Murray might get a whole quarter. Lamar Jackson has said that he's going to, in the Baltimore Ravens have said he'll get the same run he got last time, which was 1 quarter and 2 to 3 possessions. You're looking at best 2 possessions for a lot of these quarterbacks who are going to go out there for the whole quarter today. 3 if they get lucky with the timing, get the first kickoff, and then there's not long drives. So I'm not really interested in that, and they're going to be going up against top defenders. So I'm not really interested in that. The best thing you're looking at there is like 7 fantasy points, where there's definitely going to be bound to be guys who are going up against 3rd and 4th stringers. And this is for every position, who will be getting more opportunities and be landing on the 15 fantasy point mark, and you're just going to be sitting there like a sitting duck. So Cody Kessler is interesting to me today. Look, Cody Kessler is a terrible quarterback, but Nate Sudfeld is going to be injured and done for the preseason. Nick Foles might play this game. Not Nick Foles, Carson Wentz, the real MVP of the Eagles. No, Carson Wentz might actually play this game, but even if he does, Kessler's going to get a huge role. He's going to take over the role that Sudfeld saw, backing up Wentz, which was around 18 pass attempts. Now, that's not that great for Kessler. Kessler's a pretty garbage overall quarterback. He's regarded as a check down king, but just the opportunities, potentially 20 attempts today, if not more, since there's an injury to Sudfeld. I think Kessler's interesting today. Probably one of the guys I get to the least, but he's going to have a ton of opportunity. Ryan Finley's going to be super interesting for Cincinnati. He's right now kind of the quarterback 2. He's moving up the depth charts. He's going to be the quarterback 2 coming into this game after Andy Dalton, kind of passing already Jeff Driscoll. The only worrisome part here is when you become the quarterback 2, you play better defenders. So instead of playing 3rd and 4th stringers like he did in week 1 where he looked really good, he's going to be playing 2nd and 3rd stringers, and the team wants to see this. They want to see, can you actually back up our Andy Dalton, who's been known to be a little bit injury prone, Because can you play these 1 and number 2 defender type player starters and backups and actually have success, or are you only good against the dumpster fire guys off the street? So Ryan Finley, he had a nice week 1. I'm looking forward to him. The guy that I'm probably the most high on, well, one of 2, maybe 3 guys I'm the most high on is Dwayne Haskins Jr. for this week. Look, he had a terrible week 1. He looked absolutely disgusting. He had 2 interceptions. Somebody got in my comments saying you hate Dwayne Haskins or whatever. No, I don't. I actually like Dwayne Haskins. I was at Penn State. I got to watch him live. He's definitely a good QB. He's going to be the QB of the future for this team. You now have Colt McCoy being ruled out again. Haskins and Case Keenum played three and like a third. So 3 whole quarters and then like a third of the fourth combined. Now they signed a third quarterback. They have a third quarterback on the roster. I'm not too worried about him getting any significant run. Maybe plays half of the fourth quarter. So Haskins is looking to play around 2 quarters in this game. 2 quarters, and you should note against backups because Case Keenum is going to come in and start. Haskins had 17 pass attempts or somewhere close to 20 pass attempts in the first game. I imagine he sees that and potentially more in this game. And again, he'll be facing a lot of second and third stringers. I like Haskins today as a guy who probably sees the most opportunity out of any of the quarterbacks on the slate, or one of the guys who sees top 3 opportunities on the slate. Clearly has great talent based on where he was drafted. And I think a lot of people are going to get kind of scared away from him throwing 2 interceptions and burning some people in week 1 fantasy. And then a couple other guys that I have listed. Matt Schaub is definitely going to be a guy who you want to get to. He's a productive veteran who's going to see a lot of run versus second and third stringers. We know Matt Ryan will play a quarter at most today, if indeed that's even what they do with him. But Matt Schaub, he had a great outing his last time out. Now Atlanta's third game. There's some backup or some potential work for the backups here and really trying to fight for the number 2 job at the quarterback behind Matt Ryan. And Schaub's kind of had a really good camp, and not even kind of, he's had a really good camp. He's a productive veteran who probably is going to take 15 pass attempts to 20 in this game. Again, one of the guys right there with Dwayne Haskins that I have a lot of upside in or a lot of good feelings about. Mike Glennon is a guy who had 200 passing yards, had 2 interceptions as well in week 1. He's now dropped to number 3 on the depth chart behind Nate Peterman, according to John Gruden. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with him dropping to number 3, facing worse competitors. He had a good yards per attempt. He had a lot of fantasy points per attempt in terms of just yardage. It's just a matter of actually getting in the end zone. If he gets in the end zone in that game, limits 1 interception on a drive to a touchdown instead, which again, obviously I'm just trying to pull things in and put them out. But he has probably the best preseason performance out of any of the quarterbacks not named Paxton Lynch last week. So yeah, I have a lot of interest in Glennon now that he's kind of creeped down the depth chart. Do I think he's a good quarterback? I think he's serviceable. I think he's, clearly not great if he's been paid by teams a lot of money and then they go with other quarterbacks ahead of him on multiple teams so far, whether it's the Bucs, whether it's been the Bears, and now Nate Peterman, one of the worst quarterbacks, the worst quarterback in like NFL history last year, now jumping ahead of him. So I have more interest in Glennon. On the flip side of that, Peterman getting hype and had a good week 1, nothing great. Getting hype, now the number 2, a lot of hype from Gruden. If people are going to jump on Nate Peterman when now he's a little bit more popular, facing better opponents, first stringers and second stringer defenses instead of third and fourth, I'm just going to run away. We know what this guy does. It's not like he's improved that much. I don't think he has. I haven't seen anything, reports on him changing anything in his mechanics. Or anything really in his brain. That's the biggest piece, like psychology-wise. The guy's just throwing so many interceptions. So now he's going to be facing actual NFL-based defenders this week, and that's just a nice way for me to say, okay, he's more popular, he stinks, and he's facing better defenders. I'm going to get away from him. I'd rather Glennon there. And then I have Trace McSorley as a 6th option. Look, I'm a Penn Stater, as you can see right here. I'm literally double repping. This is just gross. Am I actually in college anymore? But Trace McSorley, he had a lot of run, the most run. He's going to be facing the Packers, and their second and third stringers are very thin right now, already dealing with some injuries on their starting unit. But he's a guy who not only can he throw the ball, a deep ball accuracy in college, but he actually has the ability to scramble and run. I don't expect Lamar Jackson to play more than a quarter here. I expect Trace McSorley to get most of the second half run. So in terms of my top interest right now at quarterback, it's going to be a Dwayne Haskins. And then it is probably the top guy, but again, I'll touch on this on the article later. And then it's going to be getting into sort of a Matt Schaub, Mike Glennon as my second and third interest. Ryan Finley, pretty close as well, but him moving up as the second quarterback ahead of Driscoll facing 1s and 2s. It's going to push his skill set, but it's going to make it more difficult for me to like him more over some other options. Now, just touching on some other things in quarterbacks really quickly, Gardner Minshew, he's going to be starting most likely once again for Nick Foles in Jacksonville. Jacksonville guys were terrible. All the quarterbacks stunk, but he's the guy who most likely has the most upside starting and playing a quarter and a half. Again, I'm not going to be getting there, but it's important to note. And then a lot of the starters, like we already touched on, I don't care about Aaron Rodgers or Andy Dalton or Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray playing a quarter. They're going to get 2 drives. Do you feel comfortable with those guys getting 2 drives? And keep in mind, 2 drives for them is probably 10 pass attempts at most. You're probably looking at 8 to 9 to 10 pass attempts out of 2 drives, if they even get 2 drives. We saw Kyler Murray, or we saw Patrick Mahomes only get 1 drive in the first quarter last week. The other team got the ball first, then they took a long drive, then the other team got the ball, and then he was out, right? So that can happen. So 1 to 2 drives, you're looking at like 8 to 9 pass attempts on average. Even if they complete an above average amount of those pass attempts, they're looking at like 5 to 6 completions. 5 to 6 completions. Do you really want to pay the same price that you can for those guys compared to guys who are going to have, instead of 8 to 9 pass attempts, 20 pass attempts today? More than double the amount of opportunity. I don't think I want to. The big names are flashy for week 3 fantasy, in my opinion, preseason. Not today. So that's where I'm at with quarterbacks. Hopefully this helps. I'm going to move on now to running backs. I actually have to filter my running backs out here. And let me just do this. I got to filter this all the way down. Cool. I don't think I filtered some of these positions just yet, but that's fine. I'll do that right now. So we'll just sort this out. Be real quick. Cool. Do a little Excel work here for you. I probably have to do this for wide receivers as well. Pardon me. There we go. So running backs, I mean, there's a ton on the roster, or a ton of opportunities today, right? 10 teams playing. There's going to be a lot of running backs. I don't have that much interest in a lot of them. It's mainly 6. And I'm going to be talking about a couple of them. Jordan Ellis, probably not a name you're ever going to recognize. He's probably my favorite running back on the entire slate today. Look, you have Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard dressing today. There's been no news on how much they're going to play. It's not going to be more than a quarter, if even a quarter. So outside of that, you have other players on this roster, right? You have Williams, Trevion Williams, who was Cincinnati's guy last week starting. Bruce Rims, he's doubtful for today. You have Rodney Anderson, who's already, I believe, ruled out for today. So then the only other running backs out after the first quarter, and again, Bernard and Joe Mixon might only play 1 possession and they're done 7 minutes into the first quarter, but first quarter at most. After the first quarter, the only running backs on this roster are Quentin Flowers right now for Cincinnati, and then Jordan Ellis. Ellis in the first preseason game looked great, and now he's going to get so much more run. Like, I don't know who plays these 3 quarters. Ellis is going to have to play at least a quarter and a half. He's more talented than Flowers. He's probably going to play 2 quarters. He caught 5 passes and had 3 carries last week. So he had 8 opportunities last week, and that was with Williams being on the field for pretty much a quarter as well. So I have a lot of, and also you had Anderson as well. So I believe that Ellis is going to be probably my favorite play today. Nobody's going to know who he is, except for you watching this, so a few thousand. So thanks for stealing that. But again, I'll touch on this later. He had 8 touches, and again, 5 of them were passes. He had 5 targets in this game. It's just too hard to pass up a pass-catching running back who nobody's going to own in a backfield where after Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard come out in the first quarter, he's the most talented guy out of the 2 between him and Quentin Flowers, and he's kind of fighting for a roster spot right now. Special teams player, probably more so. But as a running back, I think he's going to get like 15 touches in this game probably. I don't know where else they go on the ground. So have interest there. My next interest is in Green Bay at running back. It's Dexter Williams against Baltimore today. Look, he's out of Notre Dame. He works really well in this Matt LaFleur offense. Obviously, they have Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams might not be playing again. He didn't play the first week. He's questionable for this game. I don't think they'll push him. Aaron Jones might play 1 drive. I don't think Aaron Jones, they put him in for the whole quarter. Some starters will play a whole quarter here for the Packers. I don't think he will. He's been dealing with an injury. If he plays at all, it's going to be 1 drive. After that, the Packers have a hodgepodge of running backs. They have Trey Carsons, they have a Darren Hill, Jamal Williams, we talked on, Malcolm Johnson, all these guys, but it was Dexter Williams who saw 14 rushes and 1 reception for 18 yards last week. That doesn't bode well for him in terms of regular season. You don't play a guy who has skill out of Notre Dame, a guy who you've kind of raved about a little bit. Obviously, you have Aaron Jones you're raving about, Jamal Williams to an extent. But another guy who they've been talking about there is Dexter Williams. You don't play him 15, you don't give him 15 touches in week 1 and then say, yeah, he's a guy that we want to get into our offense. Like, no, you don't do that. That's what you do with the guys who are fighting for a roster spot or might not make the team. But for preseason, I don't care about that. Dexter Williams should get more run today. There's probably still going to be no Jamal Williams. There's probably still going to be a limited to no Aaron Jones. And it seemed obvious that they wanted to see what they have in Williams. And he is a guy who can pass catch. LaFleur said that they want to use him more in the pass catching game. Again, he only had 1 target, but he caught that for 18 yards, and I imagine there's going to be more of that going forward. Justice Hill for Baltimore is another guy who just stands out a little bit. He had the most work for Baltimore last week. You're going to have the first quarter. Lamar Jackson didn't really run at all last week, so I imagine they might use that offense or that piece of the offense a little bit more this week. Once he's out of the game, and once the starters are out of the game there in Baltimore, the Gus Edwards, in the crowd, you have Justice Hill fighting for a playoff spot or roster spot. I keep saying playoff spot, roster spot. He's probably the guy I like the least. There's not too much out there in terms of his upside. It's just the fact that in this Baltimore offense, they're going to be run heavy. They're built around the run. They're built for the run, and he's probably going to see 8 to 10 touches. Not my favorite play. Much prefer Jordan Ellis and Williams and a few more guys we're about to talk about. Brian Hill for Atlanta. So there's a backup job right now going around behind with Tevin Coleman out in Atlanta. Obviously, Devontae Freeman's not going to play a ton, if at all. And the backup job is kind of open right now. Brian Hill was in Week 17 last year, fantastic, scored a touchdown in Week 1 of the Hall of Fame game, played decent last week, and now you have him here, Week 3. He's battling with pretty much Ito Smith, and then they have a rookie out there as well. Let me actually find the rookie's name because I can't actually remember it. Quadri Olison. Quadri Olison is actually from Pittsburgh, so he was a running back who scored, I think he had 1,200 rushing yards last year. So he's also in the mix, but Brian Hill's the guy who's kind of becoming this front runner and taking over right now ahead of Ito Smith, in my opinion, for the RB2 job. He's a guy who there's a lot of stories out there in terms of his inspiration, why he's doing what he's doing. You should read them. It's fantastic. But he's the guy who's most athletic. He's versatile, similar to Ito Smith, except I believe he just has a lot more muscle on him. So Brian Hill's interesting. And now you get to these two Jets running backs who I have interest in both of them. Number one by far is Elijah Mcguire. I don't think Bell's playing in this game. Ty Montgomery's getting all the hype in the world in the preseason right now, but that translated into like 4 touches last week. And it's a big reason why. He's getting all the hype because he's going to be a part of their regular season offense. You don't put a guy who's a part of your regular season offense out on the field for a ton of work in the preseason. So Week 3, Ty Montgomery might be a name to remember. But for right now, no, not Week 2. This is the guys who are going to be the 3rd and 4th stringers trying to get some action in the game. And Elijah Mcguire right now has fallen to number 3, maybe even number 4 behind Bilal Powell, wherever he sits right now on this Jets depth chart. Well, Jets depth chart, trying to say that one fast. But yeah, Mcguire, if he doesn't get picked up by this team, he's a fantastic player. He's going to get drafted somewhere, or not drafted, but drafted maybe fantasy and deep leagues, but he's going to get acquired by some team. He had 12 touches last week. 6 of them were receptions, 38 yards and a touchdown. This guy can catch the ball. The Jets have a lot of running back depth. So much talented, versatile running back depth, whether it is Bilal Powell, Le'Veon Bell, Ty Montgomery, Elijah Mcguire. All these guys, even Valentine Holmes, who we're about to talk about, you probably don't know who that is. 12 touches last week, 6 were receptions for a touchdown. 6 is a huge number. And again, he's going to be the guy who, after Bilal Powell, after Ty Montgomery comes in for his 1 drive, maybe 2, he gets a lot of work against the 3rd and 4th stringers. Mcguire is going to be a weapon. He's going to be a guy I target in the running backs today a lot because I think he has some of the most upside with a Jordan Ellis. And then my final interest is on the same team, Valentine Holmes. He's fighting for a roster spot right now. He's a running back who you probably don't know about. He caught 3 balls. He had 3 rushes, but then he also caught 3 balls for 30 yards. He's sort of a poor man's Elijah Mcguire, in my opinion. He's a deeper sleeper. He's a bubble watch type of player. I much prefer Elijah Mcguire, especially since everybody's the same price. But Holmes was a guy who, in the 4th quarter last week, against 4th stringers, was dominating. And if they give him more run this week because they want to see what they have in him, see if he should actually be somehow utilized on this team, if not at running back, special teams, maybe on just a scout team. He's a guy who's versatile, getting a lot of raves. And again, the receptions are big here. I much prefer Mcguire. He's going to have just more opportunity, but Holmes should see an increasing role in this offense. And then just to touch on the players I don't like. Oh, Sal, where's your Miles Sanders hype? Look, there's so many running backs in this backfield for Philadelphia. Sanders only got 3 attempts. All the running backs got 3 to 4. 4 was the most attempts out of all these running backs in the backfield. Let me name them for you. Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Corey Clement, Wendell Smallwood, Josh Adams, Donnell Humphreys. I think he's the one who saw 4. And then Darren Sproles. There's like 6 or 7 guys who are going to see options in this game. Miles Sanders might be the first guy in, which also doesn't help him against the starters against Jacksonville. So I'd like Miles Sanders for Week 3 preseason. I love him for the regular season. Maybe not love. I don't think he ever gets 20 carries a game in this Philadelphia offense that's just stacked with running backs. But yeah, that's why I don't like him. I'm a Penn Stater. Again, as you can see, I think he's a fantastic back, studying really alongside and training with Saquon Barkley. But in preseason Week 2, you're probably looking at like 5 rush attempts in this game. Can he break off a 40-yard touchdown? Yeah, but we could say that about every other running back on the slate. So hold your horses with the hype for preseason Week 2. I know I hyped him up last week for Week 1, but I also did say he'll probably get less than 5 attempts. So keep that in mind. Outside of that, in terms of news, nothing really. I know that we talked about Ty Montgomery. I don't have as much interest today. He's a Week 3 type of guy. I know that there's going to be a lot of interest in Josh Jacobs, seeing what he does for the Raiders. He didn't play last week. If Josh Jacobs actually starts, and John Gruden, the running back they drafted, a lot of hype in him. John Gruden said he'll have Week 1 and Week 2, so a very small sample size to show that he can handle a full workload. Otherwise, they're going to work Jalen Richard into the third down back option, and that's not great if you want to draft Josh Jacobs. You're only giving this rookie 2 weeks to cement himself as the 3 down back. But in the preseason, yeah, I'm not. This would be his first start. He didn't play last week. I'm not interested in that. If he plays at all, which I don't think is a guarantee, it's not going to be that much run. It's going to be maybe 5 attempts, maybe 2 drives. And 2 drives as a running back is 5 attempts. So that's what your upside is. I have no interest right now in Josh Jacobs. Can he score a 1-yard touchdown? Yeah, but again, so can every other running back on the slate if that's going to be your argument. Let's move over to wide receivers. Again, I have to do the same thing quickly here. This should be a lot easier. just to show my interest. There's going to be more interest at the wide receiver position, as you can see. I'm going to go a lot more in depth in the article about my wide receivers because right now I have 18 interests, and I'm not going through all of them right now. And again, it's because there's 10 teams on the slate, and you're going to have much more wide receivers getting action than you're going to have for the running back and the quarterback position for obvious reasons, right? There's one of those guys every time out there compared to potentially 3 to 4 wide receivers. So I'll go through a couple of them that stand out, and then again, you can screenshot this for yourself, or you can kind of download and see where I'm ranking my wide receivers later today. I'm going to rank all of my interests on Patreon. Again, you can get that down below. Check out the course as well. But quickly, just to go through a couple that stand out. In terms of the Philadelphia wide receivers, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is the guy I'm going to probably get to the most if I want to from Philadelphia. Now, that doesn't mean the most on the slate. There's much better wide receiver options in my opinion. But from Philadelphia, it's because he's been Kessler's favorite target, and now Kessler should be getting the bulk of the work. In college, he was regarded as Randy Moss on his team, and he's also been compared and has been working alongside Alshon Jeffrey and getting praise from Jeffrey. So the big piece here is that Kessler is going to get more work, and he's been Kessler's favorite target. So J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, yes, he's going to be sort of this guy who stands out as the best option today in Philadelphia at wide receiver position, in my opinion. But also keep in mind Kessler's like average depth, or he can only complete passes that are like 10 yards or less down the field, so not much upside in that regard. For Jacksonville, there's 2 wide receivers right now. There's really more. Like, they have their main wide receivers, DJ Chark. They have, who I think Chris Conley's going to be a monster this year and a sleeper in fantasy leagues. And then they have D.D. Westbrook. Marquise Lee is also injured. But then they have a couple and a lot of wide receiver depth fighting for their final 2 spots. You have Terrell Pryor, who I think is going to get cut. You have Keelan Cole, who I think probably gets the 5th wide receiver job. And you have a bunch of younger guys fighting for that 6th spot. Trey McBride and Tyree Brady are the 2 guys who I believe are the most in line to get that spot. A couple of things. McBride has looked good in the first game. He had a couple of catches. He seems to have built a rapport with Minshew, but so has Tyree Brady. So Brady's built a rapport with Minshew. Both of these guys I think would be great on other teams, but my worry here is, yes, I have interest in them. Probably more so McBride than Brady. McBride should be getting more run. He's the more talented guy overall. He's the front runner to kind of beat out maybe a Terrell Pryor senior for that 6th spot. But it's just so scary to want to roster either of these guys because your best quarterback is Gardner Minshew today throwing to you. And if you go looking at the stats, these guys had like a combined 98 passing yards or like 100 passing yards flat last week out of the 3 quarterbacks playing for Jacksonville. They're all terrible. So I don't have much interest in getting to a lot of the Jacksonville receivers, but if you did, those would be the ones just to kind of note on. In Washington, there's a couple of interesting spots. Terry McLaurin right now is a rookie. He's not going to be starting, I don't think, tonight. He'll probably be coming in against the backups, which is good. Josh Doctson, who's been terrible, will probably be starting. So McLaurin is an interesting play. Again, he's not going to get as much run because right now he's being regarded as probably opening up as the wide receiver 1 out across from Paul Richardson on the outside for Washington moving forward for week 1, the way that it's going. So he'll be a wide receiver 1 talent against backups, which is good, but won't have as much run. The guy I'm looking at is Darvin Kinsey Jr. for Washington. He's a guy who's on the bubble right now, and he had a really good week 1, 5 catches for 85 yards. That does not cement him on this roster. He continues to have to work. He'll continue to play 3rd and 4th string guys, and he needs to keep that up to actually make this team as the wide receiver 6. He's been turning heads in practice. He's athletic and big. He's a guy who, he got open. He had like 6 or 7 targets last week, caught 5 of them. I think he continues to work and be good. We already talked about that we like Dwayne Haskins Jr., or Dwayne Haskins right now, and Dwayne Haskins' favorite target in training camps has been Darvin, and in week 1 has been Darvin Kinsey Jr. So I have an interest in maybe stacking those guys right there. Just flying around to some other names that stand out. Michael Floyd, so it's interesting. He's been right now the guy turning heads. There's been some injuries in the Ravens training camp. But again, do you trust Lamar Jackson's arm? I particularly think it's a lot better. I think he's he's the best fantasy draft right now, season-long value in the entire thing. People are just undervaluing that he led the league in fantasy points per dropback, way higher than Patrick Mahomes last year because he can run. Yes, but it's good for fantasy. Yeah, Michael Floyd is just a name to remember. Right now, I think he's the wide receiver 1 for a preseason type of game that I target in Baltimore by far, but it's going to be difficult because you're going to see him coming in and out, and you're going to see Lamar Jackson, once he's out of the game, just terrible quarterbacks coming in after that. And so it's interesting to point him out as the guy in Baltimore I'd go to. Not sure I get there today. J.J. Nelson is getting a lot of hype. So Hunter Renfrow is a guy who I have some interest in, but I don't think he gets that many snaps today. Week 3 of the preseason, I'm going to be all over Hunter Renfrow. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's a really good sleeper in season longs for Oakland in the slot. Rookie already starting there from Clemson. But J.J. Nelson, after kind of coming back a little bit from a couple of bad early practices this year, now John Gruden's hyping him up. He's getting more snaps with the first team. He's going to get extended run today, John Gruden says. And he's a guy who has deep threat upside. I like him a lot tonight. J.J. Nelson, again, he's a boomer bust type of player, right? Does he catch that 30-yard pass tonight? Does he catch a touchdown and put you over the top? He has more than likely a chance out of any of these guys on the slate to do so, especially because he's a professional. He played for the Cardinals as a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 2. Now he'll be facing third and fourth stringers. I do like him quite a bit tonight. Arizona, no interest in tight ends. They're not going to be using them. But in terms of wide receivers, there's a lot to talk about here. You have Keyshawn Johnson, who might not be playing today, but if he does, there's going to be a lot of interest, at least in my mind. He's probably the second best receiver on this team behind Christian Kirk. I know Larry Fitzgerald is there, but I'm just talking about pure gas left in the chamber overall over the next 5 to 10 years. Larry Fitzgerald might be there 10 years from now, but I highly doubt it. Trent Sherfield had a great week 1, had 5 targets, 4 receptions. He's battling for a roster spot. He's been having a very impressive camp. It's just going to be so hard for him to actually make the bubble when you have other wide receivers on this team like we already talked about. Larry Fitzgerald, Isabella, Christian Kirk, and Hakeem Butler are probably already on this roster along with Keyshawn Johnson. So Trent Sherfield is fighting for that 6th spot. He looked good in week 1. I think he continues to look good. Talked about Keyshawn Johnson. If he's out, that's going to actually help Sherfield, so keep an eye on that. Hakeem Butler, he's a deep threat guy, deep threat upside. He's one of the best A-dot guys, one of the best air guard guys last year, a limited sample. But he'll probably be the 4th wide receiver on this team for the preseason, which means he'll face backups, maybe some third strings. Again, he's sort of like a J.J. Nelson, except more risky in my opinion. I think J.J. Nelson's actually going to see some targets today. There's a great chance Hakeem Butler in this game, with the quarterback play that Arizona has behind Kyler Murray, is not even going to have the opportunity to catch a ball, similar to how DK Metcalf got behind 2 defenders in his week 1, only ended up with 1 catch on 4 targets for 8 yards, but got behind 2 defenders and looked fantastic, and Geno Smith absolutely missed him, so it looks like he didn't have a good week. I kind of worried about the deep threat upside for Butler in this game for Arizona. I much prefer Trent Sherfield out of all the Arizona wide receivers. And then that's it. There's a lot more guys I could talk about. There's sneaky guys in Green Bay, a guy named Darius Shepard, Jake Coomer, who everybody knows at this point if you're a preseason player. But Darius Shepard right now, Trevor Davis got injured for the Packers, so Shepard is taking over on the special team. So it seems like he's probably going to make the team if Davis remains injured, which is unfortunate for Davis. But he's getting a lot more snaps on special teams, showing his versatility. Been playing and getting some raves right now as a red zone target for Aaron Rodgers. So anytime you get that, you're going to get more playing time. So Darius Shepard, somebody who's also interesting. Lots of wide receiver options in Cincinnati. Damian Willis, Josh Malone, and Auden Tate. I think I prefer Willis and Tate over Malone, but it's pretty close. All those guys are going to see some run today. Tate has been turning heads back-to-back years, but there's just so much competition in Cincinnati, even with A.J. Green down, and this is probably why there's more competition for a backup job and to really get on the roster. Willis has been kind of shooting up the depth charts the most. Malone is currently on the depth chart behind A.J. Green. And then you have Auden Tate, who 2 years in a row now has just been turning heads, but there's so much competition out there. So I think all of them are in play. I probably prefer Willis, Tate, and then Malone. So that's it for wide receivers. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot I didn't cover because I don't want to go through 18 or 20 names. I think we just went through like 8 or so. So I want to make sure this video is digestible. Save a lot for the Patreon rankings. Again, you can get those down below. Tight ends. Tight ends are always a disgusting part of fantasy. And here's the strategy for tight ends in the preseason. Look, you don't want to play the quarterbacks who are going to be playing in a quarter, right? Or even the running backs because they just won't have as much opportunities. But tight ends in general are a terrible spot. It's a terrible position. You're lucky. And Travis Kelce caught 1 ball for 30 yards and he had like 4.5 fantasy points last week or 4.6. And that was enough. You could have won a lot of contests or even won the tournament because not a lot of tight ends are even catching a ball or going out on passes in the preseason. If they catch a touchdown, there's a great chance like only 10 people own him because he's a 4th string, 5th string tight end who was just on the line and went out for a pass on a play action, right? There's not much upside, so I'm actually going to have a lot more interest in starting tight ends than a lot of backup ones because, look, the backup ones that I would have interest in aren't on the slate or like a Darren Waller right now. They're injured, right? Darren Waller for Oakland, he's going to be an absolute monster, play a lot on the outside, play a lot in the backfield. So I'm going to have a lot of interest in some starting tight ends today that I think have upside in their matchups. So James O'Shaughnessy, he's probably not going to be a starting tight end for Jacksonville today, but he's catching a ton of touchdowns in practice. He's been used as like their primary target in terms of tight ends in the red zone and also one of their primary targets just in general in the red zone right now. So that's interesting to keep an eye on. You have D.D. Westbrook and these guys, but they're not the red zone type targets. Chris Conley is that guy. He's also been catching touchdowns for Jacksonville, but the next guy up is James O'Shaughnessy. So I think he's a good play today. And then I get into some starters. Jordan Reed, if he actually is going to play a quarter today and see what the talk is out there, if he's actually going to get a quarter, I prefer him over any backups who are going to get a quarter, right? Tight ends today usually will play a quarter or so. So if he's going to get one, I get it. He'll be facing the top defenses, but he'll also be having Case Keenum as his quarterback who's been targeting him a lot in practice. I prefer him. Same reasons why I like Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham's been having a great camp. Apparently, he's been having the best camp since he was a Saint, which is good to hear. But again, it could be all called coach talk. But if he's going to be playing a quarter with Aaron Rodgers, even though it's against Baltimore's pretty stingy defense, I do like Jimmy Graham. I also like Robert Tonyan for the Packers. He's been getting a lot of hype and taking more and more snaps with the first team offense. Rodgers has been praising him. If you remember last year against Seattle on a Thursday night game, he caught like a play action 60 or 50-yard touchdown from Rodgers, did a pretty cool dance afterwards. It was like their whiteout game or wherever you just color rush and they wore all white. I just remember that as a Packers fan. But yeah, Tonyan, he's going to be taking more and more reps with first team. He already has, and they want to implement him into the offense according to Matt LaFleur, the head coach. And then the rest of the tight ends, it's just kind of hodgepodgey. Chris Herndon's going to be a tight end, probably going to be suspended. I believe he already is suspended for the regular season, a couple of games, but he's going to be playing a quarter against a Atlanta defense that gave it up to the running backs, but also the tight ends last year. Obviously, it's a new defense. Things have come in and out, but I do prefer Chris Herndon, who had been known last year to be kind of a staple and a security blanket for Sam Darnold. If he plays a whole quarter, which many of these starting units are, I do like him as well. And then some just guys to keep in mind. Mark Andrews is a guy who didn't play on a ton of snaps, like 60% of snaps last year. He's being overhyped this year in terms of season-long leagues because Lamar Jackson targeted him the most. But again, he was a tight end who's only on the field like 60% of the time. You're going to find tight ends on the field for 80 to 90% of the time in a lot of offenses. So regular season, I'm not that high on him. But tonight, another starting tight end who I believe if he just catches 2 balls for 20 yards is going to be enough for you. That's how bad the tight end position is. And then Luke Wilson, only because there's some coach speak around Luke Wilson. The offensive coordinator in Oakland wants to incorporate him more. There will be no Darren Waller today for Oakland. He's still injured. I believe he was like in a sling in practice. So Luke Wilson seems to be the guy who's going to get some run with the starters as well as maybe some extended run. And they want to incorporate him more into the offense because they want to run some 2 tight end sets out there in Oakland. So hopefully this helps. Tight end, yeah, it's the opposite of quarterbacks. I don't want the quarterbacks in their 8 or 9 pass attempts that are going to be playing one quarter today against solid defenses. But I will take the tight ends who have 2 to 3 targets today, maybe 2 to 3 catches in that first quarter, because comparing them to the rest of the tight ends, those other tight ends are going to have 1 to 2 targets as well in the fourth quarter, even if they're playing worse defenses. Whereas the quarterbacks in the fourth quarter playing worse defenses that are coming in are going to have 20 targets across the third and fourth quarter, or 20 pass attempts. So it's just so much more of a drop-off you're missing out on if you kind of roster those starting quarterbacks today, in my opinion. Whereas rostering the starting tight ends, 1, they're going to have a lot more touchdown upside than anybody else on the slate. And they're 2, probably going to have more or the same amount of opportunities at a higher skill level. So this is where I'm at. Probably a long video, but hopefully this helps. Follow me on Twitter at SalvationDFS. You can also hit up the NFL DFS course link down below. My Patreon article where I'm going to be ranking all these plays later today is with link down below. Some free stuff as well. Follow me on Twitter. Like I said, SalvationDFS. More updates there. My name's Al. You already know that. Peace out, gang.